Imadu upon you on your Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. Blessing of the Sabbath. Barakatha Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Nathalanawa, Hashabath, Bashalawam, Thowada, Amen. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives us the Sabbath in peace. Thank you, so be it. The Ha'ayim Ma'ad Asherayim Akkad, Psalms 121. Anya Harayim Ma'ayanyam Ya Oh Harayim Ma'ayan Yabu'a Isaiah Yabu'a Mayahawa Shai Shamayim Waratazar La'a Yanathan Lamawat Regalia Yala'a Yanawam Shashamarka Hana La'a Yanawam Wala'a Yeshan Shashumar Yasharella Yahweh Shamarya Yahweh Tazaya Ayam Ya Yam Yawamam Hashamash La'a Hakaya Wayarat La'a Baliyala Yahweh Yashamaya Makom Ra Yashamar Napasha Yahweh Yashamar Hawalakya Wabawaya Maithai Wa'aid Iwalam Basham Yahweh for water Amen.
Psalms 121, a song of degrees. I will lift up mine eyes into the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth, and even forevermore. Amen.
Amen. Shema Yashrela, hear, O Israel. Shema Yashrela, Yahweh, Allah Yahweh, Akkad. Shema Yashrela, Yahweh, Allah Yahweh, Akkad. Shema Yashrela, Yahweh, Allah Yahweh, Akkad.
Deuteronomy 6 and 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. Amen.
Amen. Tapala Yahweh, the Lord's Prayer. Abba Yahweh, Shabbat Shemayim, Kodash, Hayah, Shamka, Yahweh, Malakwithka, Faba'ah, Ratazawanka, Hayah, Aisha, Ba'arataza, Ka, Bashamayim, Nathalanawa, Lakam, Yowum, Za, Wasalakwanawa, Kabawathnawa, Kasalaknawa, Kabawathjanawa, Wala'a, Habiyanawa, Om, Messiahwan, Abo, Hawashinawa, Marakaya, Laka, Hamalakwa, Waha'ala, Wathaparat, La'ayulam, Amen.
Matthew 6 and 9. After this manner therefore pray ye, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen.
Amen. Ha'aishara Matazawaf, the Ten Commandments. La'ah, Yahaya, Laka, Alahayim, Akarim, Al Panya, La'ah, Thaisha, Laka, Paso, Wala'ah, Tha'ibadam, La'ah, Alakwaka, Shamwa, Yahweh, Alahayaka, Lashua. Zakar, Ath, Hayawam, Hashabath, La Kodashwa, Kabad, Abiakar, Wa Amakar, La'ah, Tharatazak, La'ah, Thana'ah, La'ah, Thaganah, La'ah, Thainah, Shakur, La'ah, Thakamad, Ko, Asherah, Lara'ayakah, Aman.
Exodus 20:3. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. Amen.
Aman. Yeshabah, be seated. Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Nathan Lanawa, Par Yahagapin, Thawada Aman, La Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ath, Yasha'ala. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh in the name of Yahweh Shai with Israel. I madra upon you, Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. Opening prayers. Barakatha Yahweh, Hagadol, Rakhuam, Abiyah, Wanara'a, Aliyawan, Malak, Shal, Shemayim, Wa'arataza, Wako, Dabayim, Kayayim, Wagam, Hamashiach, Mayahawa, Arawanawa, Ahadnawa, Hapala, Yawaitiza, Yahawashai, Zakarnawa, Yahweh, Baratazawan, Imka, Yasha'ala, Izanawa, Bana, Wasap, Yasha'ala, O, Nanawa, Yum Yun, Aitha, Kayawamyam, Makodam, Babakusha, Shalat, Mayaka'ala, Wahatazawadat, Alahayim, La, Maganawa, Rapanawa, Washamar, Alnawa, Baikwo, Shalat, Harocha, Shal, Yahawashai, Lanawa, Lalamanawa, Rabim, Kakama, Tabawana, Wada'ith, Shal, Dabaraka, Bahasham, Yahawashai, Thawada, Thamyad, Wa'iwalam, Aman. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, the great, merciful, mighty, terrible, most high power, King of heaven and earth, and all things living, and also the anointed from Yahweh, our Lord, our friend, the wonderful counselor, Yahweh Shai. Remember us, Yahweh, favorably, your people Israel. Help us build and gather Israel. Most high, we beg you, right now, like the days of old. Please send Michael and the righteous powers to protect us, heal us, and watch over us. Mainly send the spirit of Yahweh Shai to us to teach us much wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of thy word. In the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you always and forever. So be it. Repeat the Hebrew only. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives us the law. Barakatah Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Athalanawa, Hathawara. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives us light to see. Barakatah Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Athalanawa, O war, Lara Awa. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the ram's horn to call the people. Barakatah Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Athalanawa, Korun, Ha'ayol, Lakorah, Ha'aim. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the olive oil to anoint Israel. Barakatah Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Athalanawa, Hasheman, Zayath, Lamashak, Yasha Allah. Yeshua, be seated. All right, shalom, shalom. Peace and blessings to the brothers and sisters throughout the nation of Israel, throughout the four corners, those watching on the live stream, those listening on the teleconference, and the Akim that's here in the school. Ashar Shabbat, which means happy Sabbath, right? This is Hayashar Kanas, the congregation of Israel, where we teach the laws, statutes, and commandments found throughout the Holy Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, as well as the hidden books known as the Apocrypha, where we teach the laws pertaining to ceremonial laws, dietary laws, moral, civil laws, history, prophecy, fruits of the spirit, testimonies, all things that encompasses our correction and direction as doctrine that the Most High has given us in these last days for us to follow, right? I want to jump right into the scriptures, but before we do that, because I know we started right around noontime, I wanted to, for the new viewers and listeners, just preface, some of the things that we do during the service and why, and hopefully that you can also do them at your homes when you're not here physically at the school. So first thing I'm going to do when we start the prayers, we usually say Amadwa Pamela Yerusalem, or stand and face Jerusalem, right? So I'm going to read this in 1 Kings chapter 8. We'll get to this a little bit later on in a couple months, but we like to just edify the reasons behind why we do the things we do. So go to 1 Kings chapter 8. 1 Kings chapter 8 and verse 47, right? Why do we face Jerusalem? Why do we face our homeland, right? 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 47. All right, and it says, yet if they, speaking about Israel, shall bethink themselves in the land whither they were carried captives, right? So if you remember your transgressions, and you ponder on them, and you acknowledge those sins in the lands where we were carried captives, whether it's here in North America, South America, Central America, Europe, Africa, United Kingdom, so forth and so on, wherever we are scattered. And if we come to remembrance of our ancient ways and what we're supposed to do in the land of our captivities, then it says, and repent, right? Apologize, make amends to the Most High in Christ for breaking those laws, and make supplication unto thee in the land of them that carried them captives. So that's where we are. We're in the land that we were carried captives. Whether you are still here, whether you moved and moved somewhere else, you're still under someone else's rule or authority, right? It says, saying, we have sinned and have done perversely. We have committed wickedness. So that's what all of us have come to know once we came into this truth. Once someone either gave us a flyer, gave us a phone call, came over to your crib, you saw someone downtown, or you saw someone on the train, and they began to break down certain things to you and let you know where we have come, where we've been, and where we've come to this point in our lives as a nation, that we are going through all these atrocities, is because of sin. And if you acknowledge those, then says that, listen, we have done all the things the Most High said not to do. Oh man, I didn't know. Oh, Most High, can you forgive me, right? If you do those things, right, saying we have sinned and have done perversely, we have committed wickedness, right? This is the land where we are carried captives. Verse 48, and so return unto thee with all their heart. Meaning now, how do you return to the Most High? By keeping his commandments, right? Christ said this, if you love me, keep my commandments. So that's how you return with all your heart and with all their soul in the land of their enemies, which led them away captives, and pray unto thee toward their land, which thou gavest unto their fathers, the city which thou hast chosen, and the house which I have built for thy name, right? So we're praying towards our homeland, towards the city, towards where the temple once stood. We know that the temple has been destroyed by the Romans starting around times of 70 AD, but we still pray towards Jerusalem. That's our homeland. This is the prayer that Solomon is making to the Most High, speaking for the future. It wasn't even just dedicated for the times that he was building the temple. He had understanding of the things that we was going to go through, and he tried to set the table so that wherever we are dwelling, we would then go and pray towards our homeland. So when we say those prayers in the morning, the Sabbath days, new moons, high holy days, to rise and face Jerusalem, it's because of this. Right? It's just not because it's something that, Samak or Elders Aquan or Kahan thought, like, hey, let's pray to. No, it's because this came out of the scriptures. Right? Now, let's go to the Apocrypha. Go to the Apocrypha. If you have a red Apocrypha, right, we're going to go to the prologue of the wisdom of Jesus, the son of Sirach, which is on page 70. Right? It's right where you go to the book of Ecclesiasticus. Before you get to chapter 1, there's a prologue. There's two prologues. One about an uncertain author, and another one about the wisdom of Jesus, the son of Sirach. That's not Yahushua. Jesus was a popular name, just like how in Ephraim's or so-called Puerto Ricans or some of the northern tribes, you have a lot of men named Jesus, right? That now coincides with Yahushua or Jesus, right? So now I'm going to go to the prologue, and I really don't want to read the whole thing. I want to jump down, but it may be too difficult for us to do that. So I'm just going to try to skim through it to get to the part that I want. So in the prologue, the second prologue, it says, whereas many and great things have been delivered unto us by the law and the prophets, and by others that have followed their steps, for the which things Israel ought to be commended for learning and wisdom, and whereof not only the readers must needs become skillful themselves, but also they that desire to learn be able to profit them which are without, both by speaking and reading. So those of us who learn, those of us who got the understanding, we can profit others by speaking and writing certain things, letters to them, so that they can learn as well. Hence, this is why we now do the classes and we keep these things online, so that we go through these scriptures and break it down so that others can profit from it to get that understanding. It says, my grandfather Jesus, when he had much given himself to the reading of the law and the prophets and other books of our fathers, and had gotten therein good judgment, was drawn on himself to write something pertaining to learning and wisdom, to the intent that those which are desirous to learn and are addicted to these things. That's one thing you got to have, like an addiction, right? All addiction ain't bad. If you're addicted to learning and addicted to reading, and those are good things. Those are profitable things. Those are things that you should covet to do. There's other addictions that now are detrimental to your mind and your body, right? This one is to the learning of the scriptures. It says, might profit much more in living according to the law. That's our objective, right? You read in Ecclesiastes 12 and 12 to 12 and 13, it says the whole duty of man is to keep the commandments of the Most High God, the Most High God, which is the laws that we read. So it says here, wherefore, let me entreat you to read it with favor and attention, and to pardon us where we may seem to come short of some words which we have labored to interpret. For the same things uttered in Hebrew and translated in another tongue have not the same force in them. And not only these things, but the law itself and the prophets and the rest of the books have no small difference when they are spoken in their own language, right? So when we do the prayers, we try to make sure that we at least do the prayers in Hebrew, but then give the edification afterwards, because we know a lot of people don't know Hebrew. For those of us who've been in this truth for a while and heard the prayers over and over and over, you now, just because of repetition, are able to now recite it along with us as we're doing it. But now the understanding of it for the newcomers who may be saying, I'm hearing what they're saying, but I don't know that Hebrew word from that, we're going to translate everything that we just said in Hebrew into English, right? If we was in another area, so somewhere in California where a lot of the northern tribes are, you check out certain camps online, they'll do their prayers in Hebrew and then they're edified in Spanish because their congregation speaks more Spanish. You probably see the same thing with others who probably do it in French or wherever we are. But we know Hebrew is our language. And when we utter those things in Hebrew, it draws us closer to our heritage and to the Most High in Christ, right? Now, last one, go to 1 Corinthians. First Corinthians, the 14th chapter. I'm going to start at verse 2 and then jump. 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and verse 2. So it says, for he that speaketh in an unknown tongue speaketh not unto men, but unto God. For no man understandeth him, howbeit in the spirit he speaketh mysteries. So when you speak in an unknown language, that's what tongue means. It means a language, right? So if you are somebody who only understands English and someone comes to start just speaking to you in Spanish, or they're holding up their hands and they're saying something in Spanish and they're praying to God, but you don't know what it is, it's of no profit to the person that's hearing it. So I'm going to read it again. For he that speaketh in an unknown tongue speaketh not unto men, because the audience is not going to understand it, right? Because it's foreign to them. It's unknown. It says, for no man understandeth him, howbeit he in the spirit, he speaketh mysteries. So in the spirit, right, he's breaking down things. He's now on a level where he can converse with the Most High and Yahweh Shah on certain levels, but the rest of the people may not be able to decipher it. So now jump down to verse 13. So like, I'm going to stay in verse 3. Let me go back to verse 3. It says, but he that prophesies speaketh unto men to edification and exhortation and comfort. He that speaketh in an unknown tongue edifieth himself, but he that prophesieth edifieth the church. So the main thing is to edify the church. So we used to, I think it was pre-COVID, probably was pre-COVID, where, where there was Old Testament, New Testament, we wanted to get into reading all the Hebrew. Oh, well, that's great for us. But sometimes for those who are watching online, I'm just imagining in my mind as we're going through 2 chapters and it may take 40 minutes or whatever, 30 minutes, depending on how, good the reader is. to go through the Hebrew, some of us have their Hebrew Bibles and they're following along with learning. For the others, you may be sitting there, I don't know what the heck these brothers talking about. It looked good though. I'm all shot, Kahan, Kum Yashara, we read Hebrew, but they're not getting that edification at that moment until we go into the English breakdown. So when you jump down to verse 13, it says, wherefore let him that speaketh in an unknown tongue pray that he may interpret, right? So that's the main part of it. So everything that we're going to read in the Hebrew prayers, we're going to follow it up along with the English edification so that you understand what's being said, that Psalms 121 was just read in Hebrew. Deuteronomy 6:4 was just read in Hebrew. Matthew 6:9 was just done in Hebrew. Exodus 20 was done in Hebrew, so forth and so on, so that now you can follow along. If you was here when we're doing the anointing prayers, you'll know Numbers 23 was just done in Hebrew, so that everything that we try to bring out of the scriptures done in our language, we edify for the readers or the audience, I should say, so that they can get the understanding of what it is that's being spoken. Some of you, or us, I should say, have, taken it to the next level that they want to learn Hebrew. I know Kahan Nabiyah stated that, in some of the classes, he's gone through certain lessons to try to get brothers and sisters on the level of reading the Hebrew, right? There's certain apps that's out there that you can get from your app store, or I don't know what it's called in the Droid, but you can go to your store and download the app that kind of goes to the alphabet and words so that you could begin learning that. Is it imperative that you learn Hebrew? No, because the prophecy told us in Isaiah 28:11 that he was going to speak to this people in another tongue, which is another language. So we can go through English Bibles, Spanish Bibles, French Bibles, Dutch, whatever it may be that we are scattered throughout the four corners, and that's now our language that we speak. The Most High has the Bible translated into this language. That's like a bonus, right? You want to know the Most High's name. You want to know Yahushua's name. You want to know our nation's name. If you want to choose a name for you based on your character or your spirit in Hebrew, you can do so, right? Either you can check it out on your own, or you can come and touch base with any of the priests, and we can help you find a Hebrew name. But it's not imperative. As when we go through the English breakdowns for the classes, it now allows us to edify and get to the understanding that the Most High wants us to get to, fulfilling prophecy. All right. So I just wanted to just touch on that because I know we have some newcomers that have come in the last month, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And I want to make sure that we all on the same page. So when you are home and we say, Amawa Panuwa Yerushalayim, stand and face Jerusalem, you know why that's being said. And you can try to find where the east is. If you're over here in America on the East Coast or whatever, we know Jerusalem is to the far east from where we are now. Cross the waters of the Atlantic and keep going. So you can say, okay, well, let me get the compass on my phone, or based on where I am, I know the sun rises from the east, so I'm going to face where the sun rises when we're doing the prayers, to be all in unison. All right. So that's the spirit and the vibration. I wanted to make sure brothers and sisters have that bit of understanding. So before we begin, I'll say Shalom, Elder Zaquan, Shalom, a warrior, Shalom, Sister Emma and Edwin. What's kid is Lob Tuab. Salak, forget. Tuab Lob. Shalom, Cherie, Brother Craig Everidge, Listen With Your Mind, and Andrea Watson. Say, oh, that's for Tazian? Shalom, brother. Could probably change her name. Oh, I think it's because it's on YouTube like that. Yeah. So shalom, those who are made a comment. Shalom, those who are watching that haven't made comment. Most High's will. You're all in good spirits. Kind of just remove yourself from the cares of the world to come and break bread with the Most High in Christ on this day. All right. So my name is Kahan Samak. We're going to dive right into 1 Kings chapter 3 and 4. 1 Kings chapters 3 and 4. Okay.
I got a link too.
Go ahead.
1 Corinthians chapter 16 and verse 15 on the righteous addiction. 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and verse 15, it reads, I beseech you, brethren, you know the house of Stephanus, that it is the first fruits of Achaia, that they have addicted themselves to the ministry of the saints. It's like you were talking about righteous addiction. All addictions and how they're not all bad.
Okay.
What was that?
1 Corinthians chapter 16 and verse 15.
Okay. All right, so we're going to continue on.
One question. Now, if you under Israel, like
Yeah, so your geography of where you are, let's say if you're, hypothetical, if you was in China or yeah, somewhere, and now Jerusalem is basically where you are to the west of you, you still face towards Jerusalem.
Okay.
Right.
So it ain't necessarily east.
Right.
It's wherever you located.
Right. Correct. Con. So the question for those who didn't hear, he was mainly looking to get clarity on if you are in other areas of the world, would you still just face the east regardless, right? It's not so much facing the east, but facing Jerusalem. For us here, we know that Jerusalem is in that vicinity where the sun rises. So we would face, for us, let me find out where the sun rises. But if you were somewhere on the other side of Jerusalem, on the west side, for farther east of Jerusalem, you would then face towards the west. Or if you are, above Jerusalem, you'd face towards the south, to where our homeland is, right?
Daniel chapter 6 and verse 10. Go along with 1 Kings 8 that you read earlier.
Okay. So Daniel chapter 6 and verse 10.
Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he did aforetime.
Right.
So it says toward Jerusalem.
Right. Just giving you an example and a testimony of specifically Jerusalem and not just the east, right? All right, Con. Okay, so let's go. 1 Kings chapter 3 and verse 1. And it reads, it says, and Solomon made affinity or an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David until he had made an end of building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall of Jerusalem round about. Right. So we see here that Solomon, for whatever political or whatever things was going on at that time, they formed an alliance. And if you check out, what happened in the past when you had certain empires or rulerships that wanted to strengthen themselves, they usually made marriages to now bring the families together so that their union would now be unbroken. It's kind of like a bond that now ties them together. So here, without knowing and going into the actual political realms that was going on, Solomon takes Pharaoh's daughter to wife, and they had somewhat of a strengthened union going forward, right? Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 9 and verse 16 before we get into the law aspect of this. 1 Kings chapter 9 and verse 16. So it says, for Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Actually, let me start at 15. Let me start up one verse, 15. 1 Kings chapter 9, 15. And this is the reason of the levy which King Solomon raised, for to build the house of the Lord and his own house, and Milo, and the wall of Jerusalem, and Hazor, and Megiddo, and Gezer. For Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had gone up and taken Gezer, and burnt it with fire, and slain the Canaanites that dwelt in the city, and given it for a present unto his daughter Solomon's wife. And Solomon built Gezer and Beth-horon the nether, right? So at this time, Solomon was raising up funds and raising up things because he wanted now to take these areas and build upon them. So here goes Pharaoh, goes in there and wipes out the Canaanites, burnt the city, burnt the town with fire, and then had now given it as a present to his daughter, who then Solomon went and built on top of that, right? So now in order for Solomon to do this, Pharaoh, who now we just read had an alliance or an affinity, now brought that to his daughter, which was married to Solomon, and Solomon would then be able to go and do certain things with it, right? But let's not forget, she's a heathen, right? Now, folks will look at this and say, right off the bat, we know how Solomon's reign ends with, the idolatry because of his wives, right? Now we see here, right at the beginning of his reign, he now is taking a wife of the heathens. Now, the scriptures doesn't tell you that Solomon was perfect, meaning he was like Yahushua, where everything he did was on point. I'd like to bring this out a lot of times, that you have a lot of righteous men of the Lord, renowned men that the Lord esteems, lets them become famous when you read the scriptures. But these men also had some flaws, right? They were not all perfect, right? Let me give you another example in the same case that we're reading here with Solomon. Go to the book of Numbers. Go to the book of Numbers, chapter 12. Numbers chapter 12. Verse 1. Numbers chapter 12 and verse 1. Somebody can read that. You want to read it? Read it loud too.
All right. Numbers chapter 12 and verse 1. And Miriam and Aaron spake against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman.
Now, this is the Moses who the Most High raised up to be the leader of the nation. It says he was like a king over the nation of Israel when you read it in the scriptures. But now here's at this point, during the time of Numbers, while we're in the wilderness, it says, and Miriam and Aaron spake against Moses because he married this Cushite woman. When you read Ethiopian, it's the same thing as saying Cush, right? Coming out of that land, the line of Ham, the genealogies of Ham. Cush is the actual biblical name, but it's also known here as Ethiopia. As you now read, as you go down the line throughout the generations, certain people's names changed or they added modern day names to them. But they was beefing with Moses because he took this Ethiopian woman. Like, what would you do? Why would you do that, Moses? So they getting on Moses about his newfound marriage. Read on.
And they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Has he not spoken also by us? And the Lord heard it.
Right. So now we have two things going on here in verse 1 and verse 2. And I have to edify this because sometimes people will say that because of this chiding or arguing that Miriam and Aaron had with Moses, the Most High now comes and intervenes and gets on them. It's not the case, right? We read verse 1, that's the backstory. Then it says, and then they said, is the Most High only dealing with you? Does the Most High only speak to you? And then it says, and the Lord heard that. Read on.
Now the man Moses was very meek above all the men which were upon the face of the earth. And the Lord spake suddenly unto Moses and unto Aaron and unto Miriam, come out ye three unto the tabernacle of the congregation. And they three came out.
Right. So now, based on these two verses, The Most High is now hearing one of the accounts of what's going on, and he's like, listen, y'all need to come out. I have to talk to y'all. Come out from the tabernacle, right? So now we're going to see what the Most High is going to address. Again, I have to bring this out because you have some Egyptologists and people who now understand certain aspects of the Bible, and they'll point out and say, well, Moses married a Ethiopian woman, so what's the problem? You brothers always talking about Israel, Israel, Israel. But even one of your Israelites married a Hamite or married someone who wasn't Israel. What you got to say about that? Right? Now we're going to read the account. Keep reading.
And the Lord came down in the pillar of the cloud and stood in the door of the tabernacle and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forth.
Come on.
And he said, hear now my words. If there be a prophet among you, I, the Lord, will make myself known unto him in a vision, and will speak unto him in a dream.
Come on.
My servant Moses is not so, who is faithful in all my house.
Right. Read on.
With him will I speak mouth to mouth, even apparently, and not in dark speeches, and the similitude of the Lord shall he behold. Wherefore then were ye not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?
Right. So what he's addressing is the fact that they looked at Moses as just another prophet. Like, why does the Most High got to deal with you and deal with you alone? Right. The Lord speaks to other different people. He could speak to me. He could speak to Aaron. He could speak to different people. Why is it just you? So the Lord now comes and addresses that situation. He said, yeah, I speak to different prophets. I can speak to them in a dream. I can talk to them in a vision. But Moses is different. I don't talk to him that way. When I come and talk to Moses, I'm coming and speaking to him plain. I'm going to come down in the chariot and I'm going to speak to him face to face so that he's going to see my similitude, not the Most High himself, but the similitude of the Most High, which would be an angel or Yahweh Shai, right? But the fact of the matter is, y'all can't just come and speak to him like you speak to somebody else, because I look at him differently. So it wasn't that he was upset because they was getting on Moses about the Ethiopian woman. He was upset because they tried to treat Moses like he was just an ordinary prophet, which he wasn't, right? Moses was one of those figures that the Lord looked at and elevated on a high stature, and his brother and his sister couldn't do that. So why are we bringing this out? Is because we show that even how the Most High esteemed Moses, and it's in the law when you read Deuteronomy, the 7th chapter, to not go and deal with these Hamites. The Lord made it plain. However, even Moses had some flaws. Not just one, there was a couple that Moses had when you read throughout the law, or the first 5 books of his issue, or I would say from Exodus going forward, of the issue that the Most High had with Moses. Specifically why he couldn't step foot in the land of Israel. So these are great men, but they were not without flaw, right? So don't look at that as a reason or an occasion to go and do the same thing, because that's what's going to happen. Brothers are going to like, well, dang, Moses had an Ethiopian woman, Solomon had this Egyptian woman. Man, it's cool, right? Maybe I can go and get one myself, but not knowing that these things are still not in congruence with what the Most High wants, right? One more, go back to 1 Kings. Go to 1 Kings chapter 7, and I got to research this, but I want to point this out. I think it's 7. Because it talks about Rehoboam's mother. Give me 1 second. Oh, yeah?
For different reasons. It's at the end of 1 Kings 13.
It's 15? It's 1 Kings 14. 1 Kings chapter 14. I was going to do 21. Right, 1 Kings chapter 14 and 21. It says, and Rehoboam the son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. So this is going to be Solomon's next in line ruler over the throne. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which the Lord did choose out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. And his mother's name was Naamah, an Ammonitess, right? So I gotta go into, because when you look at Ammonitess, sometimes it could be a woman that's of Ammon, someone who's now following after the practices or the principles and doctrines and philosophies of Ammon, or someone who's in the land. So I got to look at that. However, when you read it as is, you would say that, you know, he's dealing with, oh, he had a woman of Ammon. Now, it's not far-fetched, because we know when we read in 1 Kings chapter 11, 1 Kings chapter 11 and verse 1. Which says, but King Solomon loved many strange women, meaning heathen, together with the daughter of Pharaoh that we're reading about right now in verse 1, women of the Moabites and Ammonites. So here it goes. It's letting you know right now that he had Ammonite women to wife, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. Moabites would be what we would call today modern day Chinese people, Ammonites, Japanese, Edomites, so-called white, Sidonians, and Hittites would be those that's Hamitic in tribe, those who was there on the right there within the land of Israel before we got there, right? You'll read about Tyre and Sidon right there on the east coast. I'm sorry, the shores of the land of Israel, right? So he had all of these different women as wives over periods of time. Now, we're not going to get into that right too deep further into that. We're going to get into it later on as we get closer to chapter 11 and dive deeper into that. But as we go back to chapter 3 and verse 1, we recognize that Solomon took this woman to be his wife, but he did understand the distinction that she would have to have. She could not be just like an Israelite woman. She couldn't be like one of the daughters of Israel or daughters of Sarah. There had to be a separation at some point with this woman and the holy people. Give you an example. Go to 2 Chronicles chapter 8. 2 Chronicles chapter 8. And verse 11. Second Chronicles chapter 8 and verse 11. And it reads, it says, and Solomon brought up the daughter of Pharaoh out of the city of David unto the house that he built for her. For he said, my wife shall not dwell in the house of David, king of Israel, because the places are holy, whereunto the ark of the Lord have come, right? So now as he's building the temple of the Most High, and he's building these structures, and he's bringing these holy ark vessels in, he's like, listen, I can't have my wife around those things because they and us are holy. She's not. So I'm going to build her a place somewhere else, and that's where she's going to dwell, to make sure that he's going to keep holy things holy and the unclean or profane separated, right? So he did have that wisdom enough to do that with his now taken wife, who is of Egyptian descent. All right.
You do that today. Oh man, you'd be in trouble.
Well, it depends, right? I mean, Solomon was Solomon. So he's like, look, I'm not going to have you dwell here, but I'll build you a mansion somewhere else over here. Because when you read the scriptures, it tells you that he built a house for her almost like unto his house, right? So today, someone would say, okay, I'll go. If it's going to be of that, of course, then you not only is she going to be in there by herself, she's going to have servants and, you know, all kind of other things that go along with it, right? But that's what happened, letting you know that this woman had to be separated once we started to build, when Solomon built up the temple and started bringing in the vessels that King David had already prepared to be brought into the city.
Your wife should be able to go too. That's not fair.
Right. I know we used to have in with certain camps, you had brothers who had wives that was questionable, where, you know, they really couldn't prove, you know, if they was Israel or not, right? They didn't know, you know, they looked like they was, you know, a heathen, but they wanted to bring them to the Passover or bring them to a high holy day. And brothers like, nah. And brothers like, well, you trying to tell me I can't bring my wife? Well, before she comes, she got to prove her lineage. We just don't want to, you know, defile the high holy day, right? And this is an example where at least Solomon knew to separate his heathen women away from those things that were holy. All right, so let's go back to 1 Kings chapter 3. We have verse 2 now. It says, only the people sacrifice in high places, because there was no house built unto the name of the Lord until those days, right? So when it's talking about sacrifice in the high places, as we're going to read on, it's going to be a certain city in Gibeon where the Most High, where the people had the tabernacle. That's where we would go and sacrifice to the Most High, bring all the offerings and things, because at this point in time, we didn't have a temple yet to go and perform these sacrifices. So they was in high places, lifted up, right? It says, verse 3, and Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of David his father. Only he sacrificed and burnt incense in high places. So we know when it means to love the Lord, right? It means to, when you love the Lord, or you know the Lord, it's the keeping of his commandments. Write down 1 John chapter 5 and 3. 1 John chapter 5 and verse 3. It says, for this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous, right? So when you love the Most High, when you know the Most High, that means you are a person who's working on keeping the commandments of God. That's your focus. Will you be perfect in keeping every last one? First of all, a man cannot keep every last law, because every law does not pertain to every man. Certain laws are just for women. So a man can't go and say he's going to be unclean for 40 days because he had a male son. No, that's just for women, right? Or vice versa. There's certain laws that's only for men. There's certain laws that are only for kings. There's certain laws that are for those who now have farmland and certain things where you're gleaning your crops. It's only for that. So Solomon wasn't perfect in every law, but all the laws that were applying to him, he still wasn't perfect in keeping every law, as we're reading throughout the scriptures. All right, even though the Lord is going to deal with him on a high level. You could also write down 1 John 2 and 3, which says, and hereby we do know that we know him if we keep his commandments. That's a very good verse to use as a measure and a barometer for anyone that you encounter who says, I know the Lord, I deal with God, this, that, and the third, but then you ask him about the commandments, and he said, well, I ain't got to keep that. It says in verse 4, he that saith, I know him, and keepeth not his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. So that's how you measure a person. If they say, yeah, I'm about Jesus, and I'm about God, and I love the Lord, and he done so much for me in my life, and then you ask them about the keeping of the commandments, and they reject it, let alone saying got to keep it. They reject saying they got to keep the commandments. They're a liar, right? They don't know him. They know of another Jesus. They know of another God, which ultimately would be Satan, right? All right, so let's go back.
And what you read in Numbers 12 is interesting too. Like you said, you want to make sure you read it all together. It mentions Moses' meekness. That's a good example of fruit of the Spirit. Even back in the Old Testament, showing the fruit of the Spirit were always there. They just were brought to the forefront with Christ, and how our character in Christ is measured by our fruit of the Spirit and what level we're doing, where the Most High will be able to entrust certain men to be able to still function, even if they, in this case, maybe had a strange wife, or as far as how much money you may have, how many horses or chariots, right? Like Most High talked about the kings, not multiplying horses, chariots, and wives, that their heart turned not away.
Mm-hmm.
But for the man who's strong when it comes to the commandments and the fruit of the Spirit, he'll be more equipped to deal with those things in mass.
Mm-hmm. Done. So we're back in 1 Kings 3 and verse 4 now. It says, and the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. 1,000 burnt offerings did Solomon offer upon that altar. So we see where the high place was. It was in Gibeon, right? And it was up in the mountains in the high hills. That's where they went to go sacrifice. That's why I said the high place, right? It says, in Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night. And God said, ask what I shall give thee, right? So we just read in Numbers 12 where the Most High spoke about regular prophets or other prophets and how he can come to them in a dream or in a vision. Now he's about to do the same thing to King Solomon, to come to Solomon in a dream to find out what, you know, his ask or wants are for now being elevated and how he wants to govern or rule the people. Go to the book of Job, chapter 33. Job, chapter 33. And verse 15. Job 33 and 15. And it reads, it says, in a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falleth upon men and slumberings upon the bed, then he openeth the ears of men and sealeth their instruction, that he may withdraw man from his purpose and hide pride from man, right? So now the Lord will come to you in a dream, in a vision, right? Put you in a trance to now give you or bind instructions in you that you're supposed to now carry out. You might have wanted to be, you know, a certain profession, a singer, a rapper, a artist, a financier, whatever it may be. That was where your heart was going to be poured into. Most High can come and say, you know what, this is now going to be your duty. And you now have to go and take this path in order to execute this according to the Lord's will. So the Lord can now bind that to you in these different ways of doing it. We're speaking about the dream that Solomon is in right now. And Job spoke about the same thing. That's how the Lord, he can take that pride away from you. Sometimes before you come into this truth, you had a lot of pride built up. Right? You thought you knew it all, but the Most High can humble you like that, where you become a newborn spirit in the earth to accept the will of the Father. Right? The Lord can do that, make that upon you. But if you're not chosen by the Lord, or you don't have that destined profession that the Lord is going to have, and now you entertain different brothers and sisters or whatever, and you bringing this to them, and they rebellious and they prideful and all these different things, the Lord is testing them on a different level to see if they're going to just deal with it just on hearing. And they reject it. Okay, well, this ain't for you, right? So you can remove pride based on sealing your instruction when you're at rest in your dreams. It says, reading on, he keepeth back his soul from the pit and his life from perishing by the sword. So the Lord now can put a hand on you or put a covering on you and give you instruction, and now you're not going down a path or a road of destruction. Now you're going, unto your salvation. Now you're going unto your kingdom that the Most High has in store for you, and what the Lord has called you in for to be, whether it's a prophetess, whether it's a teacher, right? Whether it's just a priest, a bishop. There's different types of gifts that the Most High can give you that now you're going to fulfill the will of the Father. So now, when we go back to 1 Kings, this is what the Lord is now going to have a conversation with Solomon in his dream about what he desires, what his desires are. Verse 6, back in 1 Kings chapter 3. And Solomon said, thou hast showed unto thy servant David, my father, great mercy, according as he walked before thee in truth and in righteousness and in uprightness, as uprightness of heart with thee. And thou hast kept for him this great kindness, that thou hast given him a son to sit on his throne as it is this day. And now, O Lord, my power, thou hast made thy servant king instead of David my father. And I am but a little child, and know not how to go out or come in, right? So Solomon is humbling himself before the Lord, not to make himself seem to be bigger than, what he is, even though he's king. He said, man, I'm still a babe at this. I'm still young at heart in this. Can you now help me along the way to help him grow up and mature, right? So he already had a humble spirit to acknowledge that he was still young and needed assistance. Now, here's the interesting thing. Somebody had already looked upon Solomon and prayed for him that he would do what he's about to do, right? Go to 1 Chronicles. Go to 1 Chronicles chapter 29. 1 Chronicles chapter 29. Come on, this links with 7. 1 Chronicles chapter 29 and verse 1, and then we're going to jump down. So it says in 1 Chronicles chapter 29 and verse 1, it says, furthermore, David the king said unto all the congregation, Solomon my son, whom alone God hath chosen, is yet young and tender, and the work is great. For the palace is not for man, but for the Lord God, right? So David recognized that his son was about to ascend to the throne, and he still was, young at heart. He wasn't experienced, right? He now is letting the audience and the congregation know that they need to help him along the way. But not only him, but he's going to also petition the Most High or pray to the Most High. Jump down to verse 18. So 1 Chronicles 29:18, it says, O Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, our fathers, keep this forever in the imagination of the thoughts of the heart of thy people, and prepare their heart unto thee, and give unto Solomon my son a perfect heart, to keep thy commandments, thy testimonies, and thy statutes, and to do all these things, and to build the palace for the which I have made provisions, right? So David now is praying to the Lord that Solomon has a righteous heart in him, that he's not going to be like some of the kings that we read about, whether they be from the northern tribes where all of them are wicked, or some that are from the southern kingdom, right? Good portion of them was wicked. We had some righteous that came out of the kingdom of Judah, but he wanted Solomon to have a good heart. So David is praying for his son, right? Showing you that that's something that we continually want to do, to pray for our kids. Pray that they'll get the wisdom. Pray that they'll follow the way. Pray that they'll remove themselves following after the wrong paths or the paths of their friends or their peers or whoever it may be. What you see on TV, you want to pray for them. Why? Go to the book of James, chapter 5. James, chapter 5, and verse 16. So James 5 and 16 says, confess your faults one to another and pray for one another that ye may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much, or has a large weight on it. When someone advocates for you that he himself or she herself is a righteous individual, when they pray or when we pray for others, the Most High will take that into account. Yahweh Shah take that into account. He said, listen, this person is putting themselves on a line for them. You know what? Because he's good or she's good, I'll probably hear this one out. I'll probably tend to this petition. I'll probably give them a little bit more because of what he or she did. So that's why that prayer matters a lot, right? That's the same thing on a worldly level with somebody, you in a position to help somebody out and they may not know it. You say, you know what? Listen, that's my man right there. He's down and out. Can you look him out? That person may not have been looking at him or her. He's like, but for me, put that on me, man. Help this person out. It's like, all right, for you, because it's you, I'll look him out, right? But this is on a high level where you want prayer to be shown to the Lord in Christ so that they can get the help they need, that their understanding can be open, that the Lord can show favor on them. It's not about giving them monetary money or giving them certain things. Mainly it's for the wisdom. Mainly so that they can come to their true self and not follow after worldly endeavors. That's the key, right? You pray for yourself, but also pray for others. So that's what David did for his son. And his son now is acknowledging same thing David saw. My son is young. He don't know much, right? Even though I'm king, his father, he probably didn't see all that I was doing, right? I gave him orders and things to do after I'm long and gone, but still he needs a little bit help and assistance. So we go back to 1 Kings chapter 3, and we have verse 8 now. And it reads, it says, and thy servant is in the midst of thy people, which thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered nor counted for multitude. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this thy so great a people, right? So that's like how you see in certain movies and you get a genie and it comes like, listen, I'll give you 3 wishes, right? Or I give you this one chance. Whatever it is you want, I'll give it to you, right? And here it is where Solomon is now dealing with the Most High, and what he's asking for is just for the wisdom, knowledge, understanding to govern the nation of Israel. That's all he asks. He didn't say, I want to look the part. I want to be better than. No, I just want to have the wisdom to govern the people. He didn't say, I want to be the smartest person on the planet. I seen what the Egyptians had, or I seen what the Ammonites had. I seen what they had, and they got all these. I want to be better than those guys. He wasn't prideful to ask for that. He just wanted to have enough discernment to be able to judge wisely amongst the people. Go ahead.
I was thinking Dragon Ball. It works the same way that show Dragon Ball Z. You get the Dragon Ball together, you can make a wish to this dragon and grant you.
Go ahead. Verse 10, and the speech pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this thing. And Yahweh said unto him, because thou hast asked this thing, and hast not asked for thyself long life, neither hast asked for riches for thyself, nor hast asked the life of thine enemies, but has asked for thyself understanding to discern judgment. And he gave examples of what most people ask for. Pretty sure the Most High has had angels go and deal with certain people, and that's what they wanted. I want all my enemies dead. Like I forget I think it was forget that movie with Robert De Niro. He said, I want his family dead. I want this dead. Most people would probably want that. All my enemies dead, that I live in peace, right? Or I want the most gold that no one else had. Like you want to have all these things just for you. You're selfish. He didn't do that. He wanted to just be able to discern good from evil over the nation of Israel. Verse 12, behold, I have done according to thy words. Lo, I have given thee a wise and understanding heart, so that there was none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall any arise like unto thee. So there has been no king on the earth that ruled over the nation of Israel like King Solomon, right? People speak about Mansa Musa. Oh man, he was the greatest king, Mansa. Scriptures say there's no king that walked the earth that is like King Solomon that ruled over the nation of Israel, right? Now we know when Yahweh shall come and he gets the throne, that's different. But as far as for man that was down anointed and sitting on the throne, no one before him or no one to date is going to be filled what the Lord has given unto Solomon. Go to Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 7. Let's see what the Lord did. Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 7. And I'm going to start at verse 12. This is Solomon speaking on what the Most High had now done for him based on this verse here in verse 12, right? Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 7 and verse 12. It says, and I rejoiced in them all because wisdom goeth before them. I'm on page 61 in the red Apocrypha. Again, Wisdom of Solomon 7 and 12. And I rejoiced in them all because wisdom goeth before them. And I knew not that she was the mother of them. I learned diligently and do communicate her liberally. I do not hide her riches. So what the Lord had blessed Solomon with, that understanding, he said he distributes that liberally. Like, just, you know how people have the liberals? They just allow anything to go, right? They just accepted of anything, right? Solomon was liberal with the wisdom. He was willing to pour out all the riches and treasures that came from wisdom to those that asked of him, right? That's how he was with it at that time. Verse 14, for she is a treasure unto men that never faileth, which they that use become the friends of God. Talks about Abraham being a friend of the Most High God. When you have wisdom and you are keeping those commandments with that, you become a friend of the Lord. There's not, you know how sometimes they say, listen, everybody ain't your friend, right? You can't call everyone your friend. You got to prove certain people to be your friends, right? Some people have ulterior motives, this, that, and the third. To be a friend of the Most High God doesn't differ. We got to be proven in order to be counted a friend of the Lord, like Abraham was tested to be a friend of the Lord. Solomon is understanding of what it means to be a friend of God. There's a lot of associates. A lot of people are associated to the Most High God, but most have not made themselves friends yet, right? They know of God, what he likes, but they haven't crossed that line to being a friend. It says, being commended for the gifts that come from learning. God have granted me to speak as I would and to conceive as it is meet for the things that are given me, because it is he that leadeth unto wisdom and directeth the wise. For in his hand are both we and our words, all wisdom also and knowledge of workmanship, right? So now it's just like what you read in Ecclesiasticus, Wisdom of Solomon, Ecclesiasticus 1 and 1, all wisdom coming from the Lord and is with him forever. So anything that we now look to as far as for righteousness and knowledge and breakdowns and this, that, and the third, and the 12 tribes, all of that comes from the Most High. The Lord just chooses certain individuals, certain men that he bestows certain mysteries to go and spread them liberally to the other brothers and sisters. Somebody can't be as selfish into thinking that, oh, I came up with this. No, it's the Most High that has now blessed you or bestowed this knowledge upon you to disperse liberally, right? It says in verse 17, for he have given me certain knowledge of the things that are, namely to know how the world was made and the operation of the elements. So now when you get into Solomon as an individual, right, up until the time that he was being king, the Lord now gave him the knowledge like what he gave Moses, to know how the world was made, and most likely in detail that probably Moses didn't know, right? So now that wisdom is what a lot of people search after today and stumble on. How do we get here? How is the sun just sitting there? How is the moon, or what is going on? And some people get it wrong, right? They get it confused as to what they see or the things that they don't see. Solomon knew this, and the operation of the elements, right? So now when you go into the periodic table of elements and you go through all those things and trying to understand how this element mixes with that element and everything else you get into chemistry, Solomon knew all that stuff, right? He didn't have to go and sit in the classes and learn from certain individuals. It was like the Matrix. The Most High put that spirit in him where he knew this, right? He learned diligently and made sure he had the understanding and the practice of all these things. It says the beginning, ending, and midst of times. That's heavy, because he knew all the things, the events that happened before, what was transpiring during the times that he was alive, and what was going to happen in the last days that we're in right now. When we look at the myths, some people like to classify it as the medieval period, the Middle Ages, right? What was going to happen around like the Byzantine Empire. He saw us ruling in Europe. He saw that the Most High was going to make that time happen where Esau and those kingdoms would now go into hiding, and we would become and rule in Europe. Most people don't have that knowledge because those books and that information is hidden. But when you go into it, you start going into the archaeology, you start going into certain icons that they only keep limited. You start to see our images on these different walls. They have them in certain books. So when we say we're reading the King James Version Bible, most people think that's a white man's book because King James had to be white. What black man was ruling in Egypt? I mean, in Europe. What black man was ruling up there in Great Britain? That didn't happen, right? Because they suppressed that knowledge. But he knew this. He knew about the times that we're living in. He saw the treachery that's happening right now, right? The beginning, the midst, and the end of times. It says the alterations of the turning of the sun, right? Today, when we look at the sun, it just sits there. We think it ain't turning, it ain't moving, right? It is the center of the universe and everything else orbits or turns around it. Well, Solomon knew that the Most High had the sun in motion. It says, and the change of seasons, right? He understood what now was transpiring as each season goes into the next. What things are now going to be put in concert with the changing of the season. And that deals with a lot of things, right? Animals, right? The different trees, fruits, plants, planting, all of that. He understood all of that. It says the circuits of years and the position of the stars, right? So when people get into astrology and forecasting, knowing what's coming in the certain years, the Lord blessed Solomon with that knowledge. When we say Solomon knew more than anybody else that before, after him came, if you're really a person who understands the depths of these things, this is heavy. This is a lot, right? Just each one, the circuit of years or the position of the stars in concert with the other things that he knows. Verse 20, the nature of living creatures and the furies of wild beasts, right? So now going and dealing with the study of the animals, all of them. Right now, Esau probably hasn't seen or experienced all animals. The Lord gave Solomon that understanding, their nature and their fury, what drives them, what tempers them, right? When to go and deal with them and not. He had already that knowledge. The violence of winds and the reasonings of men. So now you're dealing with wind, meteorology, right? You got a south wind coming and this hurricane coming, and he knew the patterns. He knew when they were going to come from different time periods in a year. He had all that understanding. Then it says, and the reasonings of men. Reasonings of men is like a person who dives into psychology. I kind of understand how he operates. I can discern spirits. I can see how he moving, how she moving, why he's doing that, why. This man was multifaceted as a king. One who was young when he got to the throne, but then the Lord was going to fill him with all this wisdom. Sometimes the Lord just gives bits and pieces to certain individuals. He don't give it to all one individual, one person like he's doing with Solomon. You read about that in 1 Corinthians, I think the 12th chapter. So the 12th chapter about the gifts. Yeah, 1 Corinthians 12th chapter, right? But here, we're seeing what the Lord is doing with this one man here. It says the diversities of plants, the virtues of roots. Is that what, botany? Dealing with different plants? People spend their lives just doing that, right? Learning different herbs. How does it heal an individual? What things are poisonous to you, right? What things are going to be profitable to us? What things can we cut down and plant here? He understood all of that. So imagine having one man that could answer all these questions. Solomon, the thing burnt down over here. You know, a forest fire came and destroyed it. What should we do? How long is it going to take for it to come back? And what things should we do now to get the soil fertile and everything? He understood that. He understood the things that they were seeing in the heavens. He understood why people was raging, why they was going through what they was going through, why the animals was out of order. He understood all those things because the wisdom that the Lord gave him. It says,
I was going to say it's funny. You see, they'll talk about they'll talk about root workers, you know, here in North America and like in the Caribbean, people, you know, like medicine men, you know, talk about the northern tribes. Like you said, that's just like their main thing. We'll go to them just for that. But he had that in its pure form.
Right.
It wasn't corrupted. I can see that people deal with the stars, you know, deal with actual just astronomy and how the stars move as opposed to astrology and, you know, the corruption that came with that. As far as, you know, how they deal with it now versus how we dealt with it coming from the Most High.
I'm glad you brought that point out because, you know, as it talks about, you know, dealing with the position of the stars, like how you have stargazers and people who deal with fortune telling, and they use the stars or, you know, cards and different things to tell what's going to happen in, you know, your future. Their left-handed witchcraft is real, right? Because the Lord allows Satan to bless certain people with those gifts. Then on the right hand or the righteous side, the Most High has empowered certain individuals to understand them according to righteousness, right? The stars, the moon, the sun have a purpose in alignment with the Most High's commandments. If you don't deal with the commandments, if you're not keeping the laws and you still want to go and deal with the stars and moon, how do you think it's going to profit you in a righteous perspective? That's why I said you have to now measure an individual just on their knowledge of saying they're keeping the law. If they say they ain't dealing with this, then what they're now putting their hand to do to help profit you is not going to be profitable. Some may get deceived into thinking, oh, well, you know, he came to me and I made a good buck. They don't know when you read in Matthew, the 4th chapter, Satan said, all this I give you and then some if you come worship me. So yeah, people going to profit for following things that don't align with the scriptures. So you have to be careful and understanding the separation of the two, right? As they say, all money ain't good money. All money ain't good money. Sometimes you got to leave that alone. It may look good, it may look profitable, but you got to leave that alone. It may not be in your best interest or best for your soul. So I stopped at verse 21, and as you read down in that chapter, it just goes into him expounding more so on wisdom itself. One more, Proverbs. Let me see if Proverbs chapter 30. This one used to be one of y'all Kanan's favorites. Proverbs chapter 30 and verse 8. So this goes into probably the spirit behind Solomon's ask of the Most High that he was going to be gifted to rule over the nation. So verse 8 says, Proverbs 30 and 8, remove far from me the vanity and lies, give me neither poverty nor riches, feed me with food convenient for me, lest I be full and deny thee and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and take the name of my God in vain. So ultimately, Solomon was just looking for things that was going to be sufficient for him, not to be blessed with much more or to now have less that it would cause him to curse or question the Lord. So that was the prayer. Same thing that Yahushua gives in Matthew 6 and 9, right? When we do the Lord's Prayer, our daily bread, enough that's going to be sufficient for us day to day, right? We don't need to be like some of the people that we see on TV or those who have a surplus more than what they need and they forget the Lord, right? Or those who don't have as much and then they curse the Most High. Just give me enough that I can get by and not have to worry about all those other things. That's what we want. That's what the sincerity in what Solomon asked the Lord came from, right? So that's why the Lord was well pleased and he said he gave him this understanding heart. All right, so let's go back. 1 Kings chapter 3, and we have verse 13 now.
today they were referred to like what Solomon is. They would say if the person's a savant or like a polymath, which they even said that they would encourage that more so in the Dark Ages, you know, to be well versed in many fields. That was something to kind of, you know, pride yourself in, whether you were parts of Europe or if you were in like West Africa, you know, down in Timbuktu, you had a lot of, you know, men that were well versed in many things. Esau now trying to control, he'll have you narrow your focus the higher up you go in certain fields, right? And you know, people kind of look at someone that has multiple PhDs and say, well, man, you got too much school. Sometimes it's like, in order to really get the proper scope, you know, you might need to get, you know, you might need to be experienced in varied fields to solve certain problems. You know, when you try to figure things out. Like I always think about this. A brother put me on to this guy Philip Zimbardo, I think he's like a psychologist, but he got his thing not only in psychology but also in sociology and anthropology. So it's like you look at like some of his books that he writes, things he talks about. He makes it very clear like psychology alone isn't enough. You have to know how people operate within an environment with other people, and that's where the sociology, anthropology part comes in. Just using that as an example.
Done. All right, so we have verse 13. It says, and I have also given thee that which thou hast not asked, both riches and honor, so that there shall be not any among the kings like unto thee all thy days. And if thou wilt walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments as thy father did walk, then I will lengthen thy days. So the things that he didn't ask for, that the Lord realized that was still outside of just the wisdom and understanding, set him apart from still everyone else. He gave him riches and honor. And then he gave him a promise that says, if you keep these commandments, he would lengthen your days. So that shows you that's the reward or benefit for keeping the commandments of the Lord. The Most High can stretch out your days. You might was only destined in the world, if you didn't have this truth, probably was only destined to live to 32. Sin would have caught up with you. Now you've come into the truth. Now you probably can extend it to 74, right? Or whatever the Lord's will was. But because of your righteousness, the Most High has now extended you. So that's a gift in itself, just to keep that in mind, because he mentions that throughout the scriptures as far as for certain things that can cause you to lengthen your days. Honoring your mother and your father will also sometimes lengthen your days, along with keeping in the commandments. Reading on, it says, verse 15, and Solomon awoke, and behold, it was a dream. And he came to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and offered up burnt offerings and offered peace offerings, and made a feast to all his servants. Right? Woke up from the dream, came to Jerusalem, set out offerings, and then made a banquet. Says, you know, felt good about what he just experienced in his dream. Sometimes, you know, you go through nightmares, right? And the nightmare probably sit with you for a day. Like, man, I had a crazy dream last night. But imagine you have a dream like that, right? Where you now encountering an angel, the voice of the Lord, and the Lord is talking with you. And you already had knowledge of the Lord, but the Lord is now about to set you in a different path. And you now remember, you wake up. Man, it's like your whole perspective has changed now, because you now have understanding that the Lord is working with you. And then for it to happen, right? Now you definitely know that you're walking with a spirit on you that has been given to you, and you're found fortunate or blessed by the Lord to have this happen. Verse 16, then came there two women that were harlots, and the king stood before him. And the one woman said, O my Lord, I and this woman dwell in one house, and I was delivered of a child with her in the house. And it came to pass the third day after that I was delivered, that this woman was delivered also, and we were together. There was no stranger with us in the house, save we two in the house. So these two harlots, right? both got pregnant right around the same time, and they now both are bearing children right around the same time, days apart, dwelling in a house where no one else lives, right? Verse 19. And this woman's child died in the night because she overlaid it, right? She suffocated the baby, right? Baby was probably laying right next to her, and she laid on top of the baby, didn't know it, and the baby died. That's what happened to her child. And she arose at midnight and took my son from beside me while thine handmaid slept, and laid it in her bosom, and laid her dead child in my bosom, right? So she tried to do a switcheroo, right? She woke up, found out that her child was dead. I was still sleeping in my bosom with my baby. She swapped them out. I know her baby. I know my baby. Something ain't right here. Woke up and seen this is not my child, and looked over there and saw her baby. And he's like, "Nah, this is my baby," right? When it's like days apart, weeks apart. You know, some people say, "Oh, the baby's so cute, so cute." You know, I'm like, babies, man. unless you got like a Moabite baby and this was an Israelite baby, you could tell the difference between the two. But these are two Israelite women, probably, you know, in same complexion. The babies probably look the same. And she's thinking that she's not going to be able to discern the actual looks from her baby. I'm going to switch it out, and I'm going to defend and say that this is mine. You got some people nowadays, even they do this, not even at a baby level. They'll go and say, my baby or my child died from a disease or for some tragic accident, and they can't get away from that emotional attachment. And then they see somebody else that looks like or resembles their child, they go and kidnap them, right? They go and kidnap them and take them somewhere else, and they live under them for years. And then after a while, they just think it's normal. And normally it's a lot of Edomites that do that. Fortunately, it's not a lot of Israelites, but there's a lot of Edomites that do this. But this happens, right? Because they still want to have that, you know, desire to have a child. They'll go and take somebody else's child.
Yo, you made me think of that movie back in the day. I haven't seen it in so long. I remember The Hand That Rocked the Cradle.
Yeah.
She came in as a nanny.
Right.
Because I think she had lost her baby and she started breast milk, the nanny.
Yeah.
Started breastfeeding the lady she was watching, her kid.
Right.
Like creeping even on her husband. That movie was wild.
Yeah, try to take her whole spot. Man, that's an old school movie, The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. Man, that's like the 80s, I think.
I think it was the 90s.
It was the 90s? Man, that's a long time ago.
That's what I remember first seeing. It's not his first movie, just me remembering, you know, but Forrest Whitaker. Because he was in that movie. That's why I remember first seeing him.
Yeah, and there's been duplicates after it. But so this is the premise of what's going down. So the woman whose child who got stolen is the one that's coming to Solomon to petition to Solomon to try to judge between the matter. So it says in verse 21, and when I arose in the morning to give my child suck, behold, it was dead. But when I had considered it in the morning, behold, it was not my son, which I did bear. So imagine that. She don't realize anything, and she's looking, going to nurse her son, and the son is dead, right? The son is dead, and she's like, what's going on? But then when she considers, she's looking, she's like, it's not my son, right? And then it says in verse 22, and the other women say, nay, but the living son is my son, and the dead is thy son. And this said, no, but the dead is thy son, and the living is my son. Thus they spake before the king. So you can imagine them arguing back and forth. He say, da, 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 and she's probably standing there holding the baby. Now, the real mother is probably looking at her with disdain and anger, right? But she don't want to take matters into her own hands. She said, well, let's go before the king. So now the one who's the wicked woman, she doesn't think that Solomon is wise enough to be able to discern whose it is, because he ain't there. He ain't see the baby when it was born and see which baby was which mother. How would he know, right? It says in verse 23.
I know you're big on the court shows. I'm hearing as I'm reading this, I'm hearing the dun dun dun.
Yep. Verse 23, it says, then said the king, the one saith, this is my son that liveth, and thy son is the dead. And the other said, Nay, but thy son is the dead, and my son is the living. And the king said, Bring me a sword. And they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, Divide the living child in two, and give half to the one and half to the other. Right? So Solomon's like, all right, you know what, man? I'm gonna be carnal for 1 second. Let's just see. Get this sword. All right, we just split it in two. You take half, you take half. But on one hand, you're like, man, the king about to kill a baby, right? The one that's still living, kill it, and they take half of each, right? It says, Then spake the woman whose the living child was unto the king, for her bowels yearned upon her son. And she said, O my Lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. But the other said, Let it be neither mine nor thine, but divided. Right? Showing the callousness that she had in her heart now because her son was dead. This is where they get that saying, hurt people, hurt people. Misery loves company. Right? I want you to feel the same thing that I'm going through. My baby dead, your baby dead. And we both living in the same house. It's going to be painful for me to see your son growing up and my son dead. I want you to be in the same position as me. That was her thinking. The real mother said, no, I'd rather be able to see my son grow up even if he's not in my bosom. That's the same thing that Moses' mother went through when they was going out to kill the firstborn. She said, you know what? Let's push this baby and let's see if he's going to be able to dwell in the house of Pharaoh. I'd rather see him alive, dwelling with somebody else, than dead, right? Go to the book of Isaiah, chapter 49. Because you have some people who are, have a care for their children, and others who just don't, who don't care not only for theirs, but for others. That's just the reality of some that are living today. So this is Isaiah chapter 49. And 15. Isaiah 49:15, it says, can a woman forget her sucking child, that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? Right? It says, yeah, they may forget, yet will I not forget thee. So the Lord is comparing what a woman for her child feels for compassion, how a woman has compassion on her son. The Lord is saying he has the same compassion for Israel. However, the difference is the answer that the Lord said was, yea, they may forget. There's going to be cases where a woman's desire to have compassion may wane. She may not care for a sucking child and want to go out and do other things. We see that today. Women birth a child, throw it in the trash can, right? Leave out, go do some other things because they don't care for the child. Others have a desire to nurture and bring up the child, so it can go either way. But the Most High said he'll never do away with us as a nation, right? So it shows you that it is a desire for some women, like this woman who is the actual mother, to care for her son. I'd rather see him alive than without me, because she has compassion for her son. And that's where Solomon was able to now see who is the real mother, because discernment, as it says, that he was able to deal with the reasonings of men, right? This goes into the psychology and how people do the things that they do, why they function the way they function, right? Some people have a desire to want to understand what makes you tick. Why do you think that way? Why would you make that decision, as opposed to just seeing the result and operating off of that, not wanting to care about the cause? Solomon was on another level, right? So let's go back to 1 Kings chapter 3, and we had 27.
This is a good example of reasonings of men right here. Because I know the folks that might have been listening might have heard him make that declaration and was like, what? That's crazy. But he already knew, just them being in the heat of the moment, arguing with each other over the child. He knew that response that they would get. And the lady that was in the falsehood, she exposed herself.
Yep. I know if there was other people that were standing around when she said that, listen, Let it not be neither mine nor thine, divided. I was like, damn. She wicked as hell, ain't she? She wicked as hell. Verse 27. Then the king answered and said, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. She is the mother thereof. And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to do judgment, right? So now they could not get one up over on Solomon, right? Because wisdom was now being able to be dispersed liberally, and he was able to discern. He catch you off guard. So he's like, listen, man, I don't want to bring this matter. I don't want to do it like that before Solomon. And what that did was, in turn, caused the nation or the people to want to be righteous because their king was righteous. If your king is wicked, then the people going to be wicked. That's why the society is the way it is today, because you got a lot of crooked people that now just swap out the throne for another, right? They say one hand wash the other. So one hand is washing this one hand is washing this one, and they just giving each other different opportunities, giving them laws passed, giving them freedom to do this, that, and the third. But it's all in wickedness. And you see the treachery of what's happening right now. That's why in the kingdom, we all going to be perfect. There's not going to be any evil, no wickedness, no sinning, no transgression happening with us as a people. That's a beautiful day when you could comfortably walk amongst your people and not think that, men going to be looking at your wife, right? This one looking at your possessions, wanting to rob you, or still you set you up, right? Just hate you because you got this. And when you can walk comfortably amongst your people and not have to worry about that, man, I don't care about no riches and gold. If you just have a community of people that's like-minded, all for one another, man, come on. What is that? Psalms 133, what is it, 133 and 1? Man. Yeah, you because we have never seen it, we haven't lived it, we got to prescribe it in our minds. That's like Yahweh Shah said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. You got to, think on that this is what we're waiting on to come. I ain't even care about, I'm going to have this many slaves. You're going to have, nah, everybody being in perfect harmony and unity, thinking the righteous way across the board. Nobody else is, that's heavy in itself, right? So that's what Solomon, and when you look at what the scriptures that we read on, right, there's not a lot of times within the nation of Israel that had a king on the throne that we lived in peace. Solomon's name, peace, Shalamah, right? Peaceable one. During his reign, Israel was in peace and harmony. No one came to try to attack us. We didn't have to go out to war with nobody. None of that happened. And then wisdom was flourishing. Man, imagine in the kingdom, it's going to be even higher than this that we read here. Say again? This is the closest that we got. You're right. Right? Closest that we got to the kingdom. I forgot there's a scripture that talks about how the Most High, forgot the verse, that the Lord gave Solomon the kingdom of heaven, right? And it's worded in that manner, like we speak about the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God coming, and it's worded that he bestowed upon Solomon the kingdom of heaven. And that's the closest glimpse that we have to the kingdom to come.
Yeah, I was just saying, mentioned there was a book, they found that we had to guess and say, okay, it's probably a forgery. They had like the cases of Solomon, and you had like a book just for the cases that were brought to him like this one. Anytime I read this, I always get like, man, I want more of these. Can we get more? Like, we get like a proverb, not just a proverb, but just a book just of these. It's like case number this, that, the third. It's like so-and-so came and they took so-and-so's oxen.
I'll be spending all that'd be the best book in the Bible for me. I want to see the case loads. They got like how people get them folders and like, okay, let's go and see. Okay, case number 138. This man going against this man for land, for property, for this or that, and you seeing what's being presented and how he decided the case. Oh man, right? It's going to tell you certain things just can't be. Either it was not meant for us to dive into that. The Lord didn't he put one, right? But he didn't go into all the different facets of all the things that Solomon had to judge as a king on the throne amongst the nation of Israel, right? But yeah, that would be That would be my favorite. All right, let's go. Let's jump into chapter 4. Not that long. I think we can skip through this kind of quickly because it has a lot of names of officers that was a part of his cabinet, right? So this is 1 Kings chapter 4 and 1. It says, so King Solomon was king over all Israel, and these were the princes which he had: Azariah, the son of Zadok, the priest. And when it says princes here, it's not talking about like one of his sons. It's talking about a prince is also known as a chief man or renowned individual, right? A person who now fit the position of authority to now reign or deal with these affairs. So a prince is not always the son of a king. It is also a chief man, chief over a tribe, or just a person who's been selected to fill a position. All right. Again, it says, and these were the princes which he had: Azariah, the son of Zadok, the priest; Elihoreph and Ahiah, the sons of Shisha, scribes; Jehoshaphat, the son of Ahilud, the recorder, right? So you got secretaries and people who now took notation of all the events and things that were happening, and then also read them back. You read about that in the times of Esther, right? During the times of Esther, where at a certain point in time, when the king got bored and he came out, and they read back to him the accounts of what happened. That's how he found out about what Mordecai did, right? And he was like, what did this happen? We got to go and honor this man, right? Because you got people who record and people who now give you back the account, right? That's what these were. Verse 4, and Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was over the host, and Zadok and Abiathar were the priests. So we read about them in the previous chapters. Benaiah was the captain of the host that Solomon now, he was causing him to go out there and handle certain affairs, fall on certain men, kill them on the altar, all kind of things, right? Verse 5, and Azariah, the son of Nathan, was over the officers, and Zabud, the son of Nathan, was principal officer and the king's friend. And Ahishar was over the household, and Adoniram, the son of Abda, was over the tribute or the money, right? So you had certain people who was over different affairs, right? He's holding this position, he's holding that position, he's doing this, he's doing that. It's just like how when you have a president, they have a cabinet, right? He's over the treasury, he's over this, he's over that, or she's over this. And now those individuals have people underneath them, right? But these were the chief people. That's why I said these were the princes, right? It wasn't that they didn't have people under them. They were the one that Solomon put in position to handle those affairs.
I like how Nathan the prophet, who didn't, respect David's person, told when he needed to hear it, when he needed to hear it. Because, other folks might have probably been afraid to say anything to the King David when he was in the wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You see how his sons were, hooked up or set up. So I think those are his sons that pretty much got these chief positions. So it shows how, when you are favorable to the king, especially the king's son, it's like, oh yeah, you're so-and-so's son, yeah, your father was good to my father.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna look you guys up.
Right.
So nepotism ain't always bad. And I like that name in verse 6, Adoniram.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably what Adoniram, because like high Lord, the Lord on high.
Yeah. Verse 7, and Solomon had 12 officers over all Israel, which provided victuals for the king and his household, each man in his month. So like each man his month in a year made provisions. So he had selected men that was now for each month that now had to provide provisions for the whole month for the nation. So it was like everything that was going to happen. Let's just say it's the first month, right? And it's the beginning of the year. You got the Passover coming up, 7-day feast. So now he had to make sure that everything was going to be in order for that month, dealing with the king and his household, and then making sure everything else is done. So now you got the first month, you got the second month, you got the third month. We're about to go into the 7th month, right? In a couple of weeks, we're going to go into the 7th month, which is going to be the memorial blowing of trumpets. So now we was keeping that same thing. We would say, Gabar, you got to now make sure that everything is, we got 3 high holy days going on in that month, brother. So you got to make sure everything is good, that everybody understands what's going on. We got enough sacrifices to take care of the Feast of Tabernacles, Memorial blowing of the trumpets, Day of Atonement. We're not eating anything, but you got to make sure you got provisions for everybody to be here if they want to. All of that is what these officers had to deal with in their months, right? So each month it was like synonymous with each tribe, but now for the provisions for the nation.
Now that brings up the question: Did the Romans change the months to 12 months instead of what 10 months or 9 months as we originally thought? Because here they said it was 12 of them, and each of them had a month.
Mm-hmm.
So did they change? Did they really change it, or had it been 12 months back in Solomon's time?
I'm not understanding the question. Did the Romans change?
Remember they said the Romans added a couple months. When you study, they said the Romans added a couple months and changed the names.
I don't know that.
So after gods.
I don't remember that.
No?
They didn't add.
Right.
Because December is still the 10th. It's still based on the 10th month.
Right.
That's why you have January, February, which is supposed to be 11th and 12th month. And then March is supposed to be when the year begins.
Right.
Even the Romans.
They just changed the ordering of the months.
So it's always been 12 months.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. They just changed, like when we recognize the 10th month, they recognize the 12th month to be the 10th month. When we recognize, as you go on to the 11th and 12th, now we get into the spring season, that March, around that March time should be the beginning. The first, now according to Esau, it's like the 3rd month, right? So they just changed the ordering of how we recognize when the year begins and when the year ends. But it's the same thing as observing, you know, the stars, like we said, Solomon knew, as far as for saying that the stars in the years, 1st month, 2nd month, 3rd month, 4th month, he understood that. So he put a man in charge for every month, 12 of them for every month, in order to make sure that all provisions and everything was made for his household and for the people.
I think he's talking about what Pope Gregory did with the Gregorian calendar. I think he might be talking about the Julian calendar, which is even before that. That's why we have that question. Why did they call this December?
Right.
Because Pope Gregory changed that to the end of the year in January to the 1st, whereas the Romans didn't do that. The Romans, they began their calendar in the spring too. So that's why the taxes come around the time of the spring. So they did it around the same time. That's why they call it December, because they knew it was the 10th month.
Right. And it's funny when we get we're going to come up a little bit later on when we get into the Feast of Tabernacles, right? Because there's a verse that says towards the ending of the year, right? It's not talking about the ending of the year, like if it's the 12th month, but that's synonymous with the harvest year, right? Because the crop season, the harvest season ended around the time of the Feast of the Tabernacles, because you start getting into fall going into winter. So you gathered all your crops up right towards the end, right before winter came in, and then now everything goes dormant, and you plant things so that when the spring comes in, everything is able to flourish. But sometimes people get that confused because it says the end of the year, right? And then you got, you know, even makes it more confusing with Amalek with Rosh Hashanah, right? So, and that's the beginning of the year. It's like the new year, right? He's like, hold on, it's the new year in the 7th month. But then you read the scriptures like a few weeks later, it's talking about the end. I'll be like Brother Kraymon last night. I'm confused, brother. I'm confused into what y'all talking about, because y'all saying one thing, but this don't add up. But we're going to go through it when we get to the tabernacles to kind of give more clear edification on it. All right, so now we're back in 1 Kings chapter 4 and verse 8. It says, and these are their names, the son of Hur in Mount Ephraim, the son of Dekar and Salak, the son of Dekar in Makaz, and in Sha'albim. You know, as I always just say, when you read these names in English, it's harder to read them in English than in Hebrew, right? Because you read it in Hebrew, you could just, you know the Albie said, but now you're trying to, break up the word with the ticks and everything. and Beth Shemesh, and Elon Beth Hanan. Verse 10, the son of Hesed in Araboth, to him pertaineth Succoth, and all the land of Hepher, the son of Abinadab, and all the region of Dor, which had Taphath, the daughter of Solomon, to wife. Right? So now this man, Solomon, had daughters. And as we read, you're going to have some of these individuals who married Solomon's daughters. Right? This is one that's mentioned. It says, Ba'ana, the son of Ahalud, to him pertaineth to Anak and Megiddo, and all Beth Shean, which is Zartanah beneath Jezreel, from Beth Sha'an to Abimaholah. I ain't saying that again. Even unto the place that is beyond Jokneam. Jokneam. Verse 13. The son of Geber in Ramoth Gilead, to him pertaineth the towns of Jair, the son of Manasseh, which are in Gilead. To him also pertaineth the region of Argob, which is Bashan, 80 great cities with walls and brazen bars. So as I mentioned earlier, when you start talking about cabinets, now you have people that's going out and now like mayors or certain provisionaries over these different regions, right? To make sure everything is done according to the king's will.
Bashan, that makes me think of that prophecy about Dan, right? It says he shall spring forth from Bashan.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same city.
Right.
It's probably in the north. Huh?
Probably, because going up there by where Gilead is. Verse 14. Ahinadab, the son of Edo, had Mahanaim. Verse.
Oh, man, okay, we know that city. I think that's where those were King Saul was situated, right? Before we had Jerusalem. Man was that city that they were kind of had as like the capital, if you will. I remember. We were reading back First Samuel.
Yeah, I'm gonna link it. I have to link that based on the name. Verse 15. Ahimaaz was in Naphtali. He also took Basmath, the daughter of Solomon, to wife. So here's another man that had that wed one of Solomon's daughters. It says Baana, the son of Hushai, was in Asher in Ahlath. Jehoshaphat, the son of Paruah, in Issachar. Shemaiah, the son of Eli, in Benjamin. Geber, the son of Uri, was in the country of Gilead, in the country of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and of Og, king of Bashan, and he was the only officer which was in the land, right? So all these officers, you know, had sometimes multiples that was in there, but he was the only one that was now governing that province. Verse 20. Judah and Israel were many, as the sand which is by the sea in multitude, eating and drinking and making merry. So this is the righteous eating, drinking, and making merry that you read about in Matthew's, where Yahushua says that they shall be eating and drinking and making marriages in the time that he's going to come by, but they're going to be ignorant of what they're supposed to be doing in that last days, right? They're going to be taken over like a thief in the night. Naked. This, say again? Naked. Yes, they're going to be naked spiritually, right? To their shame. Yeah. Matter of fact, go to Ecclesiasticus, since I mentioned that. Ecclesiasticus, to give you the difference. Ecclesiasticus chapter 4 and Ecclesiasticus chapter 4. I'm going to read from 15. I really want what you just mentioned as far as for this merry, drinking, eating is a good time. Like we're in our righteousness, we're in our glory. The one that you read about in Matthew, I think it's 24, when Yahushua says he's going to return and they shall be eating and drinking and making marriages, and they're going to be taken, like one from a city to. Majority of us in these last days that fulfill that is going to be naked to their shame, right? Meaning they're going to be sinning and not paying attention to the will of the Father and receive the judgment for it. But I'm going to read from Ecclesiasticus chapter 4, verse 15 down to 22.
Let's go to 4 and 20.
Yes, but loosely. So it reads, it says, whoso giveth ear unto her, the her here is speaking about wisdom. Wisdom is made in the feminine gender or feminine context. So it says, whoso giveth ear unto her shall judge the nations, like Solomon's doing. And he that attaineth unto her shall dwell securely. There was no war, there was nothing going on during Solomon's reign. If a man commit himself unto her, he shall inherit her, and his generation shall hold her in possession. For at the first she will walk with him by crooked ways, and bring fear and dread upon him, and torment him with her discipline, until she may trust his soul and try her by her laws. So now that goes into, once you come into this truth, you're going to be tempted with certain trials, and it may torment you. You may get, finger pointed, cursing out, your family, your job, whatever may now turn on you. That's where that torment comes in, right? Wisdom is testing you to see if you're worthy enough for her to inherit you. I mean, for you to inherit her, I should say, right? It says, verse 18, then will she return the straight way unto him, and comfort him and show him her secrets. So once now you've been proven by wisdom, now you're going to take it to the next level, and wisdom is start going to breaking down certain mysteries to you. Then you're going to start understanding the things from old. Then you're going to be able to now see the things that's coming, that's prophetically. It's going to all not start making sense. But without this trial, wisdom is not going to reveal these things. So you got to start, along a certain proving ground, right? It's like a trial period that you have to go through. It says in verse 19, but if he go wrong, she will forsake him and give him over to his own ruin. Meaning if he now double back and go back out to what his old man or his old woman, the old woman was doing, wisdom will leave you, right? It'll give you over to your own ruin, right? It says, observe the opportunity and beware of evil. So observing the opportunity is making sure you don't take this thing lightly, that you don't take this opportunity to be in this truth, to understand these precepts and these breakdowns, and to just think it's so careless and then allow the cares of the world, like the parable of the sower, to now choke you, and then you going back out there in the world. Observe the opportunity. It says, and beware of evil, and be not ashamed when it concerneth thy soul. That's the key. So now when it concerns your soul and someone is coming against you and it could embarrass you, but you standing for the truth, don't care if it's going to now present a certain way to the people. Be not ashamed when it comes to thy soul, right? It says here, for there is a shame that bringeth sin. That's the one we're talking about when you now get caught by the Most High, the angels, Yahushua, or even your peers doing something wrong that you shouldn't be doing. That shame is now unto sin. But then it says, and there is a shame which is glory and grace, which we just read in the previous verse, where now you standing to protect your soul, but the world looks at you as you crazy, right? That over time will lead you to grace and glory from the Most High and Yahushua. So you got to pick what shame you want, right? Do you want the shame that now is going to lead to sin, or you want the shame that's going to now lead to a reward, right? There's one and the other. Choose you this day which one you want, right? So that's what now when you look at the time that Solomon's in, he ordered the nation aright so that everybody had this desire to want to follow his lead and do the right things, right? The closest that we had to the kingdom, right? So now let's go back to 1 Kings chapter 4 and verse 21. I just wanted to go there because Gabar made a point and it triggered my mind for that.
Just a link. 1 Peter 2 and 20 to go with that.
1 Peter 2 and 20.
To go with that last verse. Like you said, on the outside, they can both look the same.
Mm-hmm.
But why the person's going through that shame, that's what's key. That comes to discernment.
Come.
Read it.
Yeah, you can read it.
1 Peter 2 and 20. For what glory is it if, when you be buffeted for your faults, that you shall take it patiently? But if when you do well and suffer for it, you take it patiently, this is acceptable with God.
Okay. So reading back on 1 Kings 4:21, it says, and Solomon reigned over all the kingdoms from the river unto the land of the Philistines and unto the border of Egypt. They brought presents and served Solomon all the days of his life. So who was reading this, a synopsis of this last night in the class about in the kingdom, how the gates is going to be open continually and the forces of the nation is going to be brought in. The gates shall not be open, shall not be closed day or night. They're going to be continually bringing these things in. So during Solomon's reign, it says they brought presents. Who's the they? The other nations brought in presents and gifts to King Solomon. But it now tells you that he reigned from the river unto the land of the Philistines and unto the border of Egypt. They brought presents. So it's a difference of perspective when you look at what the real, our homeland is going to be made up of. Go to the book of Genesis, chapter 15. Genesis chapter 15. And verse 18. Somebody can read that Bible shot. Genesis chapter 15 and verse 18.
This is the book of Genesis, chapter 15 and verse 18. And the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates.
Right. So now the Lord promised Abraham that he would give his seed, right, that land from the river of Egypt. Which river is the one that's in Egypt? The Nile. Then it says unto the great river, the river Euphrates. So it's supposed to stretch from there all the way across to the Euphrates. But now when we look on the map today, it's not the same, right? It says the same thing in Joshua, the first chapter, and the fourth verse. Actually, start from 3. Joshua chapter 1, verse 3 to 4.
Joshua chapter 3.
Joshua chapter 1, verse 3 to verse 4.
Joshua chapter 1, verse 3 and 4. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that have I given unto you, as I said unto Moses, from the wilderness and this Lebanon, even unto the great river, the river Euphrates,
right,
all the land of the Hittites, and unto the great sea, toward the going down of the sun, shall be your coast.
Right. So now when you look on the map today on the left-hand side, it shows you today's land of Israel. And this is how it's divided up, right? So when you look at it, and I usually make mention all the way to the top, you'll see Lebanon. It's kind of cut off, but you see LEB, which is really Lebanon. That was also supposed to be part of our homeland, but now it has been bordered and cut off. And then you go all the way down to the bottom, you'll see where now it's divided. But now when you look to the right, the top right, and you say this is the promised land, that is the best case map drawing of going from the Nile River all the way across to the river Euphrates, right? All of that, the Lord said was supposed to be given to us as the promised land, right? Now, this is a depiction of that, but it's not totally accurate, right? But it gives you the best visual of understanding where our actual land is. So when we're reading this with King Solomon about the border that he was ruling over from the river unto the land of the Philistines unto the border of Egypt, this goes down here to that Nile River, right? That's our actual land. But Solomon, where he ruled, was just unto the border. All right. So just when you see Israel, this land here on the left, don't think that that's actually our homeland the way it is now. Nah, it's going to be more than that, because that's what was promised to Abraham. All right. So now let's go back. Let's go back to verse. We're back at 22 now. And Solomon's provisions for the 1 day and 30. So like Solomon's provisions for 1 day was 30 measures of fine flour and 60 measures of meal, 10 fat oxen and 20 oxen out of the pastures, and 100 sheep, besides harts and roebucks and fallow deer and fatted owl, right? So this was his daily portion that was now served within his palace, right? Solomon wasn't eating all this. All those that was a part of his cabinet that was in the palace, this was their daily provision. So it's like when you see on certain movies and shows and they go into a certain area and you see that long table and they got food upon food upon food upon food there. Throughout the day, this is how much food they was eating, right? 10 fat oxen. We're not talking about like no small oxen. We're talking about huge oxen they were slaughtering and killing, cooking and roasting or doing whatever on the grill and bringing that food in. Then you got deer, then you got harts, you got roebucks, you got fowls, different types of like what was like chicken and poultry. All this was on the table every day. Different types of breads and things that was being eaten throughout the course of a day. So it would be like almost every day was a banquet. Every day was a banquet. Right? Remember, during the time of Samuel, when the nation of Israel was looking for a king, Samuel, he let it, the Most High let Samuel let the people know this is what's going to happen with the king. The king got to get a portion of your vineyard, you got to get a portion of your farmland, he got to get your best bakers and confectionaries and bringing them in to cook this great meal for him. So this is just, seeing a glimpse. We're reading it, but to get the glimpse of the food and probably how, they was probably cooking that stuff up well, right? Going up in there and you said the aroma was pouring through the halls. Cats wasn't vegan back then, man. I'm just joking. Verse 24, it says, for he had dominion over all the region on this side of the river, from Tipsah even to Azar, over all the kings on this side the river, and he had peace on all sides round about him, right? Peace, meaning no one was coming up to threaten to take his land or go to war with him because they wanted to steal the resources and things like that. No one did that. So the Lord put a spirit on all those other kings that no one would have this contrived in their heart that they wanted to go up and present conflict to Solomon. That would happen after the fact, right? After his reign, then the Lord would stir up the nations to now come and do conflicts. Verse 25, and Judah and Israel dwelt safely, every man under his vine and under his fig tree, even Dan, even to Beersheba, all the days of Solomon, right? So you'll see that expression, every man under his vine and under his fig tree, just now giving you a sense of peace and harmony, right? You're dwelling safely and securely. You read about that, and I think Micah, the 5th chapter, says the same thing, that in the kingdom, all Israel is going to dwell under their vine and under their fig tree. Right now, we're not dwelling under our vine nor under our fig tree because we are still scattered. We're still following different doctrines and philosophies. We're not following the Most High. And we're not safe and secure. When that time happens, then it's going to come back to this, every man under his vine and under his fig tree. Okay, so that's an expression of peace and harmony and safety. Verse 26, and Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots. Damn, 40,000. 40,000 stalls for horses. Man, 40,000 horses, man. That's a lot. What you going to say, Khan?
Yeah, go real quick to 25, just right down. Also, First Maccabees 14 and 12, just to show that Simon Thasai.
You said 14 and 12?
Yeah.
First Maccabees chapter 14 and verse 12.
We had that 4 moments during their time too.
Mm-hmm.
Just for a moment though, because the Greeks.
Yep.
They couldn't help themselves. They couldn't help themselves either.
So reading verse 26 again, and Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. And
did anything about like having like a fleet of cars or different types of cars, luxury cars, like that.
And those officers provided victual for Solomon, for King Solomon, and for all that came unto King Solomon's table, every man in his month, they lacked nothing. So all those men that we was reading about before, they all had positions to make sure that all the provisions were made for Solomon, every man in his month. And the animals that were slaughtered, it was for not only Solomon, but everyone that came to sat at his table. Those that was officers that dwelt there, and then for visitors. Because you had other people that's going to come and visit Solomon, to come up and see, like we're going to read later on, to come and see the wisdom, come and see the pomp and circumstance, come and see us as a nation, right, in all of our glory at that time, right? So he invited certain people to come in and to break bread with him. Verse 28, barley also and straw for the horses and dromedaries brought they unto the place where the officers were, every man according to his charge. And Yahweh gave Solomon wisdom and understanding exceeding much, and largeness of heart, even as the sand that is on the seashore, right? Wisdom and understanding exceeding, meaning that it exceeded everybody else. And a big heart, right? He had a big heart. He was compassionate, right? And he looked out for the nation, made sure that even the poor were well taken care of. That's where you go into that largeness of heart, because you have some who may have a big heart, but not take care or want to have the desire to take care of everybody. He was in a position that the Lord blessed him enough that he was able to take care of everybody that was there in the nation at that time, right? Not like today, right? You know, they say, show me, you know, the elderly and the poor, and you can judge a nation based on that, right? So you look at the most powerful nation, then you go look at the elderly and the poor and see how they're taken care of. Then you can see where their spirit is.
I like this too, because you mentioned the sand on the seashore. I'm trying to count sand on the beach. It's like trying to count all the stars. There's so many.
Mm-hmm.
And they say when you look at like a brain, the neurons almost looks like looking into heaven. You look at all like the neurons in the brain. This is looking at it from like a biological, standpoint. And just showing how the Most High created us wonderfully,
Mm-hmm.
and we fully tapped in to what the Most High intended. We reflect the beauty of nature.
Okay. So let's read on. It says, verse 30. And Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the children of the east country, and all the wisdom of Egypt. For he was wiser than all men, than Ethan the Ezrahite, and Heman, and Chalcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahal. And his fame was in all nations round about, right? So it's not that these nations didn't have wise men or people who was renowned for their wisdom. They did. It was just not on the level of Solomon or the Most High's wisdom. They had their fame, right? Oh man, like today, they look at certain individuals of different nations, philosophers, and they say, oh man, this guy spoke these things and these things. Sure, these people were renowned for who they were, but nothing compared to the children of Israel. Go to the book of Psalms, if I can find, I think it's Psalms. Psalms 87. Yep. Psalms 87. And I'm going to read the whole thing. Beautiful song.
I'm not sure if we ever had it before, but this is good to have this verse on deck for Brother Jason. I can't. I get mad at reading that.
Yeah.
So, you know why? took his knowledge from that. All right, bro.
Psalm chapter 87 and verse 1. It says, his foundation is in the holy mountains. The Lord loveth the gates of Zion more than all the dwellings of Jacob, right? So as a nation, Jacob or Israel, we have different places that we inhabit. But Zion, the capital city, David's city, is where he chose to place his name at. Verse 3, glorious things are spoken of thee, O city of God, Salah. Now check it out. This is the verse that I wanted. Verse 4, I will make mention of Rahab and Babylon to them that know me. Behold, Philistia and Tyre and Ethiopia, this man was born there. So to those that know the Most High at times will acknowledge certain individuals from other nations, right? He will now make mention of them in the scriptures. Going all the way back to the beginning, going all the way forward, you read about certain individuals in the scriptures. You know, this man was a great hunter, right? Went out there and conquered and did this and made the city Babylon. The Lord is making mention of him. And then he goes to Cyrus and he goes here. This man was born of those places. But then it says, verse 5, and of Zion it shall be said, this and that man was born in her, and the highest himself shall establish her. So the Lord can make mention here and there, far few in between, of those other nations. But when it pertains to us, the Lord will say this and that, showing a surplus that is more than what is mentioned from the other nations. It can't compare, right? So what he did with Solomon, there's other people that was renowned at that time, but Solomon superseded them all. He came out of Zion. David came out of Zion. You have a lot of righteous people, notable individuals on a high level that did great things for us that the Lord now puts on a higher pedestal, right? Because of their virtue and their knowledge and understanding. It says, the Lord shall count when he writeth up the people that this man was born there, as well as the singers, as the players on instruments shall be there. All my springs are in thee, right? When you go into the depths of the springs, it's going into the water, which goes into the knowledge. We're supposed to be like springs or fountains, the people, right? Just like when St. John 7:38, right? He that believeth on me, as the scripture have said, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water. We're like a spring springing out knowledge, understanding. So that's where it comes from. This is speaking about Israel in a parabolic form, right? When the count is made, when you go and look at who the Most High is selected to be the chosen, he's now going to go and mark those who now liberally giving out that virtue, giving out that wisdom, right? And walked in it. All right, so let's go back. That was Psalms, the whole Psalm chapter 87. Let's go back to Psalm 1 Kings 4 and 32.
That's what you just read is good too for certain brothers that want to always make everyone an Israelites because they're famous.
Right, exactly. Right. Everybody, certain camps, certain brothers. We're gonna say which camp. There's one that supersedes them all, but everybody that's out there that's a heathen, that's notable, whether they can run real good, they can sing real good, or it's like no other nation can have someone who, you know, does good things, right? Oh, that he got to be an Israelite. That guy there, he's an Israelite, right? It's like, nah, the Lord put certain spirits and gifts on the nations too, for them to do certain things, right? Even with King David, with his mighty men, I think it was Benaiah. Was it Benaiah who said he slew 2 lion-like Moabite men, right? There was 2 Moabite men who we know to be so-called Chinese men, but the Lord described them as being lion-like. They were ferocious. So they probably was terrorizing and doing all kind of things. But Benaiah by himself was able to now beat both of them, right? Then it said he went on a snowy cold day or whatever and went into the pit and fought a lion, right? So yeah, those 2 lion-like Moabite men, they was tough, but Benaiah, he was one of many that was on another level.
That tall Egyptian said, a thorough Egyptian cat. He said, had a spear like a weaver's beam.
Yes.
He said, pluck this spear, and he got him with his own spear.
Yep.
So he's captain of the host now for a reason.
Exactly.
he earned the position.
So Goliath was Goliath until David came along, right? So, you know, it is what it is. The giants from the past was who they were until the Most High put the spirit on Joshua and them, and they went and took them down. So, yeah, these men and women, they're gonna have certain skill sets and certain things, but we supersede them all. Verse 32, back in 1 Kings chapter 4. And he spake 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005, right? So he had 3,000 proverbs. We got how many proverbs? 30. We got like, you know,
How many verses in Proverbs?
exactly. So we have 31 chapters of Proverbs, right? So we ain't get all of Solomon's Proverbs, right? Then it says, and his songs were 1,005, right? So you read the beginnings of the Song of Solomon, it tells you that it is Solomon's songs. Like ain't nobody else write Solomon's. It was Solomon who was the author. But the Song of Solomon, it's not that long. But even it by itself, when you read the Song of Solomon, most people can't break down the song that Solomon was putting out there, right? It's too complex for them to read and understand what he was really trying to, you know, convey when he wrote that song, right? For us, we understand now was just, you know, a parabolic way of describing the nation of Israel to the Most High in Christ. But when you read it, you know, sometimes it get all sensual and sexual and things of that nature, and reading about breasts and suckling, and like that. Solomon was like a pervert. That's what they be talking about when you see it on TV and they try to break it down and they try to correlate Esau. Then they start showing you those statues of the Greeks and the Romans and how they're out there naked, and like you start saying, well, maybe the Jews are those guys. No, they just don't understand what the Most High Spirit was on Solomon and how he wrote those songs at that time. But we don't have all of them. And we see at different times the Lord goes and deals with certain prophets like Ezra, like Daniel's, and they have more information than what is presented. And the Lord says, no, hold that, keep that. We're not putting that one out there, right? Just like certain artists today, they go out there and make an album and they say, yeah, you look at the album and it's like 16 songs in the album. But he says, we did like 47 songs. He's like, well, what about the rest? Nah, we're not putting those out. We just keeping them, right? Then later on, the artist dies, and all of a sudden they go back to the vault and they bring out the songs. You're like, yo, why did he put this out? This song was done with. He's just holding them back, right? It's like the book of Jasher. People know that there's a book of Jasher, but the Lord doesn't have that book out. So, of course, those who wicked will say, well, the Bible mentioned the book of Jasher. We're going to make another book of Jasher, right? And put that out and try to confuse or take them off the path, right? Those who can't discern, when they read it, they don't know because they haven't gotten this yet, right? You got to get this before you go and deal with those other books. You're going to get poisoned with the information that comes from that if you don't have this first. So verse 33, and he spake of trees from the cedar tree that is in Lebanon, even unto the hyssop that springeth out of the wall. He spake also of beasts and of fowl and of creeping things and of fishes. This is what we read about in Wisdom of Solomon, right? He understood botany, he understood animals, he understood all those things, right? It says, and there came of all people to hear the wisdom of Solomon from all kings of the earth, which had heard of his wisdom, right? So he didn't have to go out to learn nothing. They all came to hear his wisdom. So, you know, what word of mouth is the best marketeer, right? One king go, somebody sent an officer, they heard it, like, yo, this guy's on another level. They go back and they start telling them, like, yo, he broke down certain things, man. I was mind blown. Get out of here. Man, he ain't like such a, listen, he ain't got nothing on him. You don't know what you're talking about. Man, listen, you got to go hear him speak. You got to go see him. And they coming one after another, one after another, one after another to see the prominence of Solomon. Imagine when Yahushua sit on the throne. Imagine that. It ain't even going to be the other nations. They got to wait because there's going to be a whole bunch of us wanting to sit at Yahweh feet and just have that dialogue, hear them stories, right? Converse, get breakdowns of past events that, you know, we want to get more insight on. We know we're going to be perfect in the law, but we want to get certain critical things, right? That's going to be a beautiful day. Yeah. Y'all young going to be flowing around. Yeah, man. If Solomon had food like that, imagine what's going to be at your Yahweh's table, man. Imagine how much stuff's going to be there. Food going to be tasting different, right? You ain't going to get, you know, how food tastes today. And it's going to be like how we read with manna.
You got to talk about how there shall be no night there.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be at Yahweh's, you know, all day long, you know, supposedly. There's some confusion, right? Is physical life, spiritual life? You gotta broke it down. If I use that, say the same thing. Like, you will always be at Yahweh's feet asking questions all day long. You know, to tell us, all right, we'll reconvene tomorrow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going anywhere.
Done. All right, so that concludes today's Sabbath service lesson. 1 Kings chapters 3 and chapters 4. As always, any questions, write them down, book, chapter, verse, bring it to the classes on Tuesdays and Fridays. Next week, we're going to be back into the New Testament. That's the wrong one. The book of Titus, chapter 3, and then the book of Philemon. Again, that's Titus, chapter 3, the last chapter, and then the book of Philemon. Also, mental note, as I mentioned earlier, September 14th, it will be the memorial blowing of trumpets, which will be the 7th new moon. So it's a double feast day. This will be the new moon, but it's also the memorial blowing of trumpets. Again, that's September 14th, Thursday night at sundown. Then 10 days following that, on September 23rd, it will be a Saturday night. Right after the Sabbath will be the Day of Atonement, right? For those who are new within the past 6 months, 4 months, 3 months, who have not kept some of these holy days, Day of Atonement, Saturday night, is where you do a total fast. Once the sun sets that Saturday night, that Sabbath evening, it goes into the Day of Atonement, and there is no drinking, no eating until the sun sets on Sunday night. So begin to prepare your mind, prepare your household to make sure that you are able to keep it. Beauty of it for most is on the weekend, right? It doesn't affect work week where you got to take off and everything else. So you should be able to dive in and spiritually keep that day. Again, that's September 23rd. It's a Saturday night, which will be the 10th day of the month, where we keep the Day of Atonement, where the nation comes before the Lord to atone for our past year's sins, right? To ask for forgiveness and mercy from the Lord, right? And we do that by negating our bodies, water or food or drink, right? And then channeling our spiritual energy to humble ourselves before the Lord. All right. So, as always, like it says in Corinthians, the 10th chapter, anything we do, we want to give all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High in Christ for the privilege and opportunity to come before him on the Sabbath day, to go and break bread with them, going through the word, to enlighten, encourage, inspire, exhort one another in these last days, to continue to have the discipline to sustain our movement and abounding in this truth, right? So whatever we do, we want to make sure we thank the Lord for the mercy that's been bestowed upon us to know the things that we know. So with that, I'll say shalom, peace and blessings to the brothers and sisters. Lord's will, you have a blessed remaining Sabbath day. Stay in the spirit, stay humble. Much is given, much is required, but make sure we stay focused. All right, stay tuned for the closing prayers. And again, shalom. Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shah, Asherah, Nathan Lanawa, Par Yahagapin, Thawada Aman, La Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shah, Ath Yasha Allah. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, or the Most High, in the name of Christ, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. Imadwa Panyor Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem for the closing prayers. Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Babakushah, Shemai, Lanawa, Aitha, Yam Yun, Aitha, Shalat, Maika Allah, Waha Allahayim, Tazwadakim, La, Shemal Ayel, Barak, Rapah, Magun, Wahakaziyak, Banya, Yasha Allah, Washalat, Lanawa, Rabiim, Kakama, Rabiim Da'aith, Rabiim Bayana, Rabiim Sabalangwa, Rabiim Amawan, Rabiim Aqua, Rabiim Ahabiim, Rabiim Haganah, Rakhanaya, Wasalak, Ko, Katayamnawa, Laha'akim, Wa'akua, Wayasha Allah, Thamyad, Wa'iwalam, Bahasham, Yahabashai, Thawada, Aman. English translation. Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, please listen to us now, right now. Send Michael and the righteous powers or angels to watch over, bless, heal, protect, and make strong the children of Israel. And send to us much wisdom, much knowledge, much understanding, much patience, much faith, much brotherhood, much love, much spiritual protection, and forgive all our sins for the brothers and sisters in Israel, always and forever. In the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you, so be it. Four Corners Prayer. Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Barak Nawa, Wayasha Allah, Wabathya Saparim, Shema, Yasharella, Yahweh, Allah Ayanawa, Yahweh, Akkad. Again, English translation. Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, bless us and Israel and the house of books or the schools. And Deuteronomy 6:4, hear, O Israel, the Lord our power is one power. Again, say Ashar Shabbat, happy Sabbath, and Shalom.
Shalom.